A recent report from MIT found that 95% of generative AI pilots at companies aren't making money. The study looked at over 300 different deployments, and nearly all of them had little to no measurable impact on profits. And yet, the stock market is hitting all-time highs. So how can something that's supposedly transforming the world not be transforming corporate balance sheets? Well, here's the thing. It's not really about what AI is doing today, it's about what investors believe it'll do in the future. They know the numbers don't add up right now, but it's hoping the billions of dollars that are being poured into AI will eventually pay off. But recently, those bets have gotten massive and dangerously concentrated. The so-called Magnificent Seven, which is the 7 biggest tech companies like Apple, Microsoft, nvidia, Amazon, Meta, Alphabet, and Tesla, now make up roughly 34% of the entire S&P 500. Now, just 10 years ago, that number was barely over 12%. Their valuations are so inflated that a handful of companies now dictate the direction of the entire US market. The Bank of England recently issued a warning about this exact risk. It said the share of the top 5 S&P 500 members is higher than at any point in the last 50 years, and that AI-focused valuations appear particularly stretched. If expectations around AI's potential start to cool, the ripple effects could be felt across global markets. And that's because for the average investor, anyone with a 401k, an index fund, or a retirement account, you're far more exposed to this AI bubble than you might think. The economy itself, at least in the US, is being propped up by optimism surrounding AI. And the concerning thing in my eyes is if you remove this AI hype, or even reevaluate it downwards, the economy is not looking too hot. Unemployment is rising, inflation is still sticky, and the necessities like housing are still out of reach for millions of Americans. Now, according to Morgan Stanley, AI infrastructure spending by major tech firms, companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta, have grown so large that it's now adding roughly a full percentage point to US GDP growth, which they say outstrips the rate of underlying consumer spending growth by tenfold. And they anticipate the big tech companies will spend somewhere in the range of $400 billion on AI investments in 2025 alone. So right now, the AI economy runs on a simple assumption. If big tech keeps spending billions on data centers, GPUs, research, and talent, eventually it'll all pay off. These companies would rather spend billions and be wrong than spend less and miss out on the potential opportunity. But with mounting evidence that most of these projects aren't profitable and valuations soaring far beyond fundamentals, it's fair to ask, is this bubble going to pop? The answer to that question is obviously subjective, but in my opinion, yes, absolutely. In fact, it's not a matter of if, it's when. And here's why. First, we got to talk about how these consumer-facing AI products like ChatGPT and Gemini just aren't very good. And the improvements that they've made since their release just a few years ago doesn't seem to be that spectacular. Certainly not to the levels where it's capable of replacing millions of jobs. But I'll come back to that in a moment. See, when you take a closer look at the financials behind this AI economy, things begin to look even worse. OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, estimates their revenue will be somewhere in the $12 to $13 billion range this year. Now, in the first half of 2025, according to news outlet The Information, their revenue was $4.3 billion. And yet, at the same time, they reported a net loss of $13.5 billion. So they are a long way away from profitability. Now, for tech companies in particular, this sort of playbook in the past has worked. They get a massive user base built up, they burn through a ton of money, and eventually, after they scale it, they become a monopoly that dominates the market. And OpenAI bulls will say, hey, they aren't even using ads yet. Once they implement ads into ChatGPT, they will start making money like crazy. And maybe that's true, but in the meantime, there's an increasingly insane amount of circular deals that are going on in between these tech companies. Nvidia invests in OpenAI, OpenAI turns around and invests in Nvidia, OpenAI invests in Oracle, then AMD invests in OpenAI. Often this is going on with money that OpenAI doesn't even have and likely never will. Now, for some of the more established big tech companies, they might be okay here if things fall flat. That doesn't mean ripple effects won't be felt. But for a smaller company like OpenAI, I think some of the deals that they're announcing are particularly concerning. And for many people, it's really what's signaling the top here. Now, even with something like ChatGPT, if you don't actually know the answer to the question you're asking it, it feels less like a tool and more like a detriment. I swear it has a 50-50 chance it will be wrong when you ask it something. The other day I asked it if I could turn down the sound of this annoying dinging noise that was in this car that I was driving that wasn't mine. ChatGPT's response was like, absolutely you can do it, here's how. But as I read through the answer, I strongly sensed that what it was saying was actually incorrect. And this is because I had already Google searched it and read up on a forum from other owners of the vehicle, and they basically said you can't do it, at least not legitimately, through the infotainment screen. So when I pushed ChatGPT a little bit further and said, are you sure that's right? It was like, oh, you're right to push back. Actually, you can't do that, and what you can do instead is this. But by then, I was already skeptical, and I'm thinking, that also doesn't sound right either. So I push again, are you sure? And it was like, oops, you're right. I don't know why I said that. You can't do either of those things, but here's what you can do instead. And once again, listed something else that probably wasn't true. But by then, I was already checked out. And I know ultimately this is just an anecdote out there. Many of you might have similar stories where something like this happened, or maybe you found it to be incredibly helpful. But just imagine you were a business and your business paid for some generative AI to assist employees or customers. And when it was faced with something to solve, it was not only wrong, but more than once it was wrong. And then imagine the type of consequence that could come from something like this, especially if the employee or the customer didn't actually know that the answer it was given was incorrect. Now, in some cases, it could be rather innocuous, like my example. But in other cases, it could cost the business thousands of dollars if a wrong answer was further acted upon. Now, I know at the same time a human error could be capable of the very same thing. But if AI is supposed to boost productivity and be the next breakthrough for our economy, then why does it feel like on rather simple issues, it actually just wastes time? I also want to be clear, this isn't like some outlier that I had. It happens all the time when I try to test these products. And if you're using Gen AI to get answers, whether that's at work or school, I'd urge you to be careful because oftentimes it's not only wrong, it's confidently wrong. And it won't admit it to you unless you truly know that it's wrong. Interestingly, the inverse is also true though. It could give you a correct answer about something, and then you might be able to still convince it that it's actually wrong. So how the fuck is this supposed to rewire our entire economy? If it can't even give correct information, it struggles to do simple tasks, and worst of all, it's overly confident every time it gives you an answer about something? I mean, I'm not saying it can't do anything right, or that the technology will be 100% useless. But what I can't understand is this notion that it will somehow be this great big thing for our economy. The way I see it is, if it even does reach this level where it becomes ubiquitous, how on earth will that be good for the economy then? It's widely agreed by many experts that if that is the case, fewer jobs will then be available. And the companies that run these models will just be making even more money than now. Now I know there's people out there who will try to make the case that newer jobs will pop up, like history has proven, during previous times of innovation. But that's not something I'm personally comfortable with resting my laurels on. And when these tech CEOs throw out the idea of universal basic income becoming a solution to the problem that they're creating, I want you to think about just how divided the US government already is on so many issues. Like, we can't even get an agreement on healthcare. We have politicians fear-mongering that people are getting free healthcare as they sit in their parents' basement unemployed playing video games. Do you think the same politicians are going to agree to give out universal basic income because AI has taken millions of entry-level jobs? I don't, but I do actually have a great idea. See, if AI is supposed to be this incredible breakthrough, why don't we start from the top down? Let's have the CEOs be replaced by AI first, and then see if that saves the company millions of dollars. If it does, they can then take all that money that the CEO used to make and disperse that to all the workers. In all seriousness though, when this bubble does pop, it'll be felt around the world. And I don't mean that to sound overly dramatic, because it literally will. But don't worry, the CEOs will be fine. Their golden parachutes are already packed. But what won't be fine are the ripple effects, the retirement accounts, the job losses, and the energy footprint we've built chasing this illusion. We're already building data centers that pollute local water supplies and drive up our electric bills. also someone can generate an AI slop video that no one asked for? I mean, if that isn't one of the most asinine things going on right now, I don't know what is. But here's the deal. If I'm wrong about all of this and there isn't a bubble, then what's coming might be even worse. A global economy reshaped by automation with job losses that make the pandemic look like light work, and a world so flooded with synthetic content that people won't even know what's real anymore.